Allow me to introduce myself.
I am the last sane sports fan.
I am a genius by trade.
I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. It's time for a Monday morning quarterback edition, even though, as I said, I always post these in the evening, but we're sticking with the title. Let's quickly run down what happened in the NFL over the weekend and last week as it pertains to some of the Midwestern teams. Thursday night football was the Colts against the Texans, and for the second week in a row, the Colts get a win without Andrew Luck. And of course, this brings out all the insane fans and even some in the media that start going on these weird tirades. Oh, well, maybe we don't need Andrew Luck. Maybe he's overrated. Maybe the team is playing better when you have a certain quarterback where you know what he's going to do and they catered the game plan to him, and there's not quite as much freedom in the hands of Matt Hasselbeck. Well, I'm sorry, but a 40-year-old quarterback is going to take you nowhere. I understand this NFL mentality, really a sports fan's mentality in today's society, to where you want to win right now, damn the future, and just go for broke every single time. But it's not going to work that way. I mean, Matt Hasselbeck did a decent job. He was 18-29, 213, and 2 touchdowns. But you're going up against the Houston Texans, which, despite the fact that they have J.J. Watt and a couple other decent pieces on that defense, the defense has just been awful. And Indianapolis's defense basically won it in the first and fourth quarters. They shut out Houston in the first, only allowed a field goal in the fourth, and that's basically how they did it. I mean, Frank Gore finally showed up a little bit, 98 rushing yards, but Indianapolis is still kind of one of those teams to where it's like their division is weak. They're probably going to win the division, but they're not nearly as strong as I had thought they would be at the beginning of the season. Andrew Luck is starting to be questioned, and it's really kind of a sad state of things right now between Andrew Luck and Andrew Griffin, because these were supposedly two of the premier quarterbacks to lead the NFL into the future. And now all of a sudden, due to weak offensive lines, odd coaching situations, just poor mental decisions within certain games, all of a sudden you're starting to question whether or not they're going to be the quarterbacks of the future, let alone the quarterbacks of the present. Because right now, both seem to be injury prone, both seem to be having a few issues within the team. Not so much Luck and his coach, although the coach of the Indianapolis Colts is running into some weird issues with the front office and all that, but I don't know enough about that to further the story right now, other than the fact that quite frankly, the way I see it is the owner's an idiot, the general manager's siding with the owner, and the coach is kind of stuck in between. Moving on, the Chicago Bears beat the Kansas City Chiefs 18-17 yesterday in what was a bad day for Kansas City. Not just for the Chiefs, but the city as a whole, as the Royals lost to the Astros. Jay Cutler ended up leading the team back. Statistically, not spectacular, but not bad. 252 for 2 touchdowns, 26 for 45. Alex Smith, he has just absolutely fallen off the face of the earth. 181 yards and a touchdown. Jamal Charles, 58 rushing yards on 12 carries. But he may be out with an ACL injury. That was the report going around yesterday. Obviously, the tests have not been done yet, so nothing can be officially confirmed. But that would pretty much ruin his season. He would be out until next year, if he can come back at all. He's getting up there a little bit in years. Matt Forte, 71 rushing yards. The Bears, terrible in the first half, 3 points all half, 3 points in the third quarter, 12 points in the fourth quarter to come back and win it. Jay Cutler doing just enough as the Bears continue their rough run. They are 2-3 right now. Kansas City extremely disappointing this year. They are 1-4 on the year, which is not to say that it is impossible to come back, but when you're down a Pro Bowl caliber running back and your quarterback has been dreadful this season, it's not looking good for the Chiefs. And that's really a disappointing coming off a season to which they thought they could build on and potentially unseat the Denver Broncos as the division champion. Right now, they're looking to get to 500 and maybe consider that a decent season. It's going to be difficult for them. Bengals beat the Seahawks 27-24 in overtime. This one was a pretty good game. I didn't get to see too much of it as I was watching the Rams game. But just the way that the scores went back and forth, it was a really intense game. Seattle rushed out to a huge lead. They were up, I believe, 24. It was either 21-3 or 24-3 over the Bengals, and then the Bengals pretty much scored all the points after that. The Seahawks got shut out in the fourth quarter. Cincinnati scored 17 points in the fourth quarter, only 7 the rest of the game. Andy Dalton, 331 for 2 touchdowns and an interception, but he was 30-44, so that's a high completion percentage. Russell Wilson was 15 for 23, 213, a touchdown and a pick. Rawls, coming out of nowhere, filling in for the injured Marshawn Lynch. He had 169 yards rushing and a touchdown. Bernard only had 80 rushing yards on 15 carries for the Bengals. So obviously Andy Dalton having to carry the load there. But Cincinnati improves to 5-0. Didn't look like they were going to. I mean, it's one of those heart-pounding games for the Cincinnati Bengals, but they keep on rolling. But as they've said on a couple opinion shows, pardon the interruption was one example, the Cincinnati Bengals have kind of used up all their goodwill. They can go undefeated the entire regular season, but unless they win that initial playoff game, it's not going to matter for anything, because that seems to be what they get stuck on. They have great regular seasons and then throw it away in the playoffs. Saints lose to the Eagles 39-17 as Sam Bradford finally comes alive. He had 333 yards, 2 touchdowns, but again, 2 interceptions. He's throwing a lot of interceptions, and I understand when you're in that kind of offensive system, you're going to throw a lot of interceptions just because that's the nature of the beast, going that quickly, trying to get the ball out quickly, and he hasn't necessarily progressed enough in his career to where he understands every single read. But he's got to cut that down. Drew Brees had 335 yards of his own, 2 touchdowns and an interception, but Mark Ingram only 57 rushing yards for the Saints. That's not going to cut it. New Orleans, again, just stagnant offensively. 7 points in the first quarter, none in the second, 10 points the rest of the way. That is not going to cut it for a team that used to average in the 30s, if not 40s, when they were really rolling. The Browns ended up beating the Ravens in Baltimore, 33-30 in overtime. That was the first time since 2007 that the Cleveland Browns had won in Baltimore. Josh McCown ended up having a huge day, 457 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, countering Joe Flacco's 210 for 1 touchdown. Not too much in the way of rushing yards for the Browns, only 49 yards for their leading rusher. Justin Forsett had 121 yards and a touchdown for the Ravens. The Ravens really just struggling right now. They're 1-4. Cleveland puts themselves back in the conversation for that division. They're only 2-3, but that division isn't all that strong. Pittsburgh is struggling a little bit, but the way things have kind of gone back and forth, you never really know. Some of the other games, 14-13, the Bills beat the Titans, as the Titans are the Midwestern team right there. Marcus Mariota has cooled off considerably after having a pretty decent couple weeks to open up the season. 187 yards and an interception. Tyrod Taylor, to match that, did well for my fantasy team because he had a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown. 109 yards passing, though. That's not going to cut it. Buffalo, though, is 3-2. There's questions about whether or not they're really responding to Rex Ryan. I don't know whether or not they will. I mean, this is year 1. You would like to think that he would last a few years. up in Buffalo. But right now the Tennessee Titans at 1-3, not cutting the mustard there either. The Lions continue their slide as they lose 42-17 to the Arizona Cardinals, as the Cardinals pretty much put their stamp back on the NFC West. Obviously, the Seahawks and Rams are still in the rearview mirror, kind of breathing on their neck, but it's a little further back when you win, and 4-1 is your record versus 2-3. Carson Palmer for the Cardinals, only 161 yards, but 3 touchdowns, as field position was kind of the name of the game in this game. Darren Orlovsky ended up playing for the Lions, or at least getting the bulk of the stats. 191 yards and a touchdown, but also an interception. Only 30 yards for the leading rusher of the Detroit Lions, as they are 0-5, and the wheels are just completely falling off in Motortown. The Cowboys expectedly lost to the Patriots 30-6. I mean, Brandon Weeden had 188 yards and a pick. Tom Brady, 275 for 2 touchdowns. Blunt for 74 yards. John Randall only 60 yards on 50 carries. That is not going to cut it. Darren McFadden, of all players, was the leading receiver for the Dallas Cowboys with 62 yards. So that shows you what kind of passing game they've got going on there. Dallas only managed 3 points in the first quarter, 3 points in the third quarter, shutout in the even-numbered quarters. So their injuries have finally caught up to them. They had a valiant effort last week, but it was just not to be had this week. The Broncos continued to win, but look completely unimpressive in doing so. Peyton Manning, again, typical Peyton Manning stats for this season. 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. That's a little bit surprising. 266 yards. Anderson was the leading rusher for Denver for 22 yards. Really, this was kind of a defensive battle, and again, the Denver Broncos defense has really been stepping up for them and basically winning the game, especially their secondary. A couple KU guys, Aqib Talib and Chris Harris, leading the way there, getting a lot of tackles, a lot of batted balls, a lot of interceptions, and they've been a big reason why the Denver Broncos continue to be undefeated, because as much as I love Peyton Manning, it has not been Peyton Manning. It has not been that vaunted Broncos offense that has led them to this record. Shutout in the first quarter, 3 points in the second quarter, 6 in the third, 7 in the fourth, so they continually got better, which is something you will see under Peyton Manning. But still, despite the fact that they're undefeated, they may be the weakest undefeated team. And considering you throw the Cincinnati Bengals in that mix with their playoff woes, that's saying quite a bit. The other games, obviously the big one, as far as I'm concerned, the Packers beat the Rams 24-10. And it's going to sound a bit like homerism, but this game was a lot closer than the score would entail. It was 21-10 for a long time, and a lot of people will say, well, that's still a pretty big margin. But the fact is, the defense of the St. Louis Rams played so well that if they could have had the ball on offense, we might have won. That's how badly the St. Louis Rams offense played and how good the defense played, because the defense deserved to win. They pick off Aaron Rodgers twice in Green Bay, where he has not been picked off since Jesus was walking on water, quite frankly. The guy was just a machine with not having interceptions, and then all of a sudden the Rams pick him off twice. They forced a fumble, but Aaron Rodgers ended up with 241 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's not all that impressive. I mean, it's good. Obviously, it was good enough to win, and that's all Aaron Rodgers cares about. But Nick Foles was awful. The offensive line was awful. 141 yards passing. He did have a touchdown, but 4 interceptions. Not all of them were his fault, but the receivers had a lot of drop balls. Just offensively, if you take away Todd Gurley, who had 159 yards, didn't get a touchdown for the second game in a row, but if you take him out of the mix, the offense was just abysmal. The receivers couldn't catch a ball. The tight ends couldn't catch a ball. There were drop balls. Brian Quick jumped for a ball that would have hit him in the numbers if he had just stayed on his feet. Nick Foles, I don't know if the sun was bothering him, because there were a couple of those passes where it was just like he threw it to a certain area and then his receiver was all of a sudden still running. So there was miscommunication consistently on the offense. It was just a terrible, terrible day offensively for the St. Louis Rams. But the defense did enough to give them an opportunity to win. You have 3 missed field goals. It was just a missed opportunity. I'm not saying that the St. Louis Rams would have beaten the Green Bay Packers, but if your quarterback doesn't turn it over 4 times, if you get even 2 out of those 3 field goals, at least you're giving yourself a shot towards the end of the game. I mean, as it stood, they still had a chance if they could have put one in the end zone, which they came very close before another interception pretty much ruined it. And something that's got to change. And I like Coach Jeff Fisher overall, but I'm tired of his statistics kind of mentality. Oh, we got to play it safe. 3 minutes and 23 seconds or 32 seconds, I'm probably getting that reversed, on the clock. 4th quarter, you're down 21-10. Go for it. I mean, he went for a 63-yard field goal, and when you have the kicker that you do, I understand that in the grand scheme of things, but just go for it. I mean, I don't know. Granted, I'm not a football coach. I've never coached any kind of football, so maybe it's that video game mentality that a lot of us tend to have in this age bracket. You don't have to go for 4th down on all the time, but when there's only 3 minutes left, what's the difference? I mean, you're still kind of banking on the fact that you're probably going to have to get an extra or an onside kick and all that. I don't know. It was a frustrating day when the defense played incredibly well. There were a couple drives to where Aaron Rodgers picked them apart, but Aaron Rodgers is going to do that. He and Tom Brady are probably the quarterbacks that are just basically unstoppable. You can only hope to contain them, kind of thing. And the Rams did an incredible job on defense, but the offense let them down, and that has been the tale of the tape that we have seen over the past few years under Jeff Fisher. And again, the thing that continues to worry me going forward with this St. Louis Rams team is you see it in glimpses, in flashes, but are they only going to raise the bar against the NFC West teams? If that is going to continually be the case, this is going to be another disappointing season for the St. Louis Rams. If they can finally start to get some of these good performances to carry over into the non-divisional games, then maybe we've got something going. But until they pick up a win against a non-divisional opponent, it doesn't matter how good the NFC West is. If you can only defeat your division opponents, you're not getting enough in the win column. That is a view from the Midwest. What are your views on all the games that happened yesterday? We've also got Monday Night Football coming up. Steelers against the Chargers. Not really Midwestern teams in there, but it still should be an interesting matchup. Couple big, hard-nosed quarterbacks in that one. What do you think about that one as well? We'll have another show for you coming up later in the week, potentially tomorrow. We'll see how busy things get. But until the next time, I'll see you then.